بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على خاتم النبيين وإمام المرسلين حبيبنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. I first want to give two shout outs. Not to my homeboy Khair al-Alam who's in the crowd. He asked for one. I'm not giving it to him today. But I want to give a shout out to number one, all of you. When I was walking in the hall, I told my wife I predicted 3 to 4 lines in attendance. And I was obviously well off because, mashallah, there's people sitting on the ground and standing in the back all around. So props to you. Back in my day, when I was a teenager, the hall wouldn't be filled this big. So it's a good sign. Number two, I want to give a special shout out and a thanks and also a warning to our sign language translator. Jazakumullah khairan. The job that they do is very difficult. Translating Arabic words, English words, translating for someone like myself who speaks at 500 words a minute, it's a very difficult job. So to have the courage, to have the ability, to have the stamina, and to have the mental capacity to keep going as we're talking is incredible. So mashallah, may Allah reward you for that, sister, and grant you the highest reward in this world and the hereafter. Allahumma ameen. Now, every one of us should desire success both in this world and the hereafter. That should be a basic desire, and that's a human desire, it's a Muslim desire. A Muslim desire for the hereafter, of course, a human desire for success in this world. Now, the definition of success differs from person to person, from culture to culture, region to region. In Hyderabad, the definition of success is Dr. Saab, right? Somewhere else, the definition of success is to have a family, to have children. Somewhere else, and it depends on the place and the time. What I wanted to talk to you about today, growing up, one of the things that I felt was a challenge, and I feel that we are often challenged with as young men and young women, is trying to find that balance between so many different angles and so many different things that are pulling at us. We find some youth who tend to be more on the focus of the deen side, right? So some of them to go so as far as to not want to even go to school or care about school, drop out of high school or not really care for college, because you know what? I got to memorize the Quran. I got to learn Arabic. I got to become, this amazing scholar or this or that, and they don't really care about their school, right? And then you find people on the opposite spectrum who are dunya focused at the expense of their deen. At the expense of their deen, right? So they don't really care about prayers, they don't really care about, hijab, or they don't really care about all the injunctions that have been given to us, because the goal is, I need to be successful in my career. And Islam calls us to a middle way between the two. And what's interesting is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala criticized those who call people who only ask for this world. And Umar al-Khattab, in a narration that we perhaps all have heard of, when he found the young men sitting in the masjid saying, we're the people who put trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's the middle of the day, it's a business time, and he's like, put your trust in Allah. He takes his stick out and he starts beating them. He's like, get out and work. The sky doesn't rain gold and silver just because you're a Muslim, right? You have to earn your share. And so we find in the dua of Ibrahim alayhi salam a very interesting thing. Surah Ibrahim, to me, all surahs are very powerful. Surah Ibrahim is very powerful in its understanding of gratitude. And one of the things I found personally, my opinion, that the most emotionally involved dua you find in the Quran is in the dua of Surah Ibrahim that Ibrahim alayhi salam himself makes for his children. He took his wife, as we all know, and his son, left them in a barren desert. And then he turns around, he begins walking away until he's out of eyesight from his wife and child. And he turns around facing them, which is also facing where the Kaaba would be. And he raises his hands and he makes a dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he says, رَبَّنَا إِنِّي أَسْكَنْتُ مِن ذُرِّيَّتِي بِوَادٍ غَيْرِ ذِي زَرْعٍ عِندَ بَيْتِكَ الْمُحَرَّمِ ربنا ليقيموا الصلاة فاجعل أفئدة من الناس تهوي إليهم وارزقهم من الثمرات لعلهم يشكرون. He says, "Oh my master, I have made from my offspring to dwell in a valley that has no vegetation near your sacred house, the Kaaba." And he says, "Oh Allah, so that they may establish the prayer." So he asks Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, "So Allah, fill the hearts of people with love for them, with some people for love for them." And he says, "And provide them from fruits, so that may they give thanks." So here's what's interesting. Ibrahim alayhi salam, first, he says why he left them there. لِيُقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةِ. I left my wife and child there, لِيُقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةِ. So the reason they're left there is to establish the prayer. But then he makes dua for their dunya. He makes dua for their social fabric to support them, and for provision, food and drink and the like, so they can have those things to survive, right? Ibrahim made dua for both their deen and their dunya. And the point I'm trying to share with you is that what does that dua end with? وَرْزُقْهُم مِّنَ الثَّمَرَاتِ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَشْكُرُونَ. Provide them with fruits and provisions so that they may give thanks. So we learn that we take from this dunya, we seek from this dunya, we try to get from this dunya as a means to a higher goal. And the goal is to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. لَعَلَّهُمْ يَشْكُرُونَ. So that they give thanks to Allah. You see, the young man who thinks that, you know what, forget school, I don't need to worry about it, you know, I'm just going to sit at home and, you know, read Quran all day. That's fine and dandy, but you know what the reality is? The reality is one day you're going to get married, you're going to have a wife and children to support. And perhaps you're going to have to support your father and your mother and your other siblings in your family, right? And if you don't have a good job, and I'm not saying, you know, getting a PhD or whatever is the the guarantor of a good job. What I am saying is if you don't care, the reality is you're going to be forced to work 2 jobs, maybe 3 jobs. You're going to have maybe 3 hours a night to sleep. You may not have any time to spend with your children because you're struggling to make ends meet, right? And so the reality is we have to use this dunya, yes, but to use it for a higher goal and purpose, to give thanks to Allah by worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But here's what's tough, is that growing up, we're pulled in so many different directions, right? We got school, we got our parents telling us we got to maintain a 4.0 GPA, you got MSA activism, you have YM calling you one way, Al-Maghrib calling you one way, you know, the MSA calling you one way, the Masjid calling you one way, all the Islamic activism that you want, then you have your own personal interests, right? School clubs, be it debate club or speech club or whatever it is. Right, that we have these interests. You have your family saying, why don't you spend time with us? Your friends wanting to hang out. You know, the masjid, you want to learn about Islam, you want to give da'wah, you want to work maybe on the side. How do you balance all of this? How do you find an even balance between all these things? Well, first of all, we have to understand that we are living in a time, one of the signs of the Day of Judgment is that time will pass by very quickly. That you won't find barakah in your time, right? And we are living in that time, where time passes by very fast. But I will say this, that for all of you, time management is a choice. Time management is a choice, right? Even if you're not good at it, you can be good at it, right? It's about making certain choices, learning about certain things, and then applying it in your life. So let me give you some tips. Number 1 is to make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the famous dua that we've always heard many times, and perhaps some of you make, we say, Allahumma hdina fi man hadayt, wa afina في من عافيت وتولنا في من توليت وبارك لنا فيما أعطيت. And oh Allah, bless us with what you have given us. Right? So blessing in your time. Ask Allah for blessing in your time. You can have someone who sleeps 4 hours a night and that's sufficient for him. He wakes up, he's refreshed, he's ready to go conquer the world. And you have some, well, I shouldn't say conquer the world, right? He's ready to go take on the world and give back to the world, all right? You have somebody else who sleeps 10 hours and he wakes up and he's just like groggy, sleepy. He has to go back to sleep an hour later and it's not enough for him. You have somebody who makes $100 a week and that suffices him for the week, and somebody else who makes $100 a week and he's out in like within the first half an hour, right? And money will take the same amount of money can go in different ways for different people. The same amount of sleep can go different ways for different people. The same amount of study for the same exam can go different ways for different people. The difference is barakah. The difference is barakah. So ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for blessing in what you do. Number 2, ask Allah for guidance in what you are doing and what you need to do. Because it's difficult. You have a priority, I want to learn Arabic, I want to memorize the Quran, I want to do this, I want to get good grades, and I want to get into law school, and I want to go to engineering, and I want to, all these things. You know what? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in the Hadith Qudsi, Ya ibadi kullukum dallun illa man hadaytuh, fastahduni ahdikum. Oh my slaves, all of you are misguided except for those who I have given guidance to. So ask me for guidance and I will guide you. And there is guidance of hidayah and hidayatul irshad. There's a type of guidance for just general things, and there's hidayah for specifically for the religion. And this encompasses both. So ask Allah to help you and guide you in what you need to choose and what you need to focus on. Number 3 is set goals for yourself. This is important. Set goals for yourself. We as a people need to be goal-oriented, right? Both personal goals and for the deen. So for example, you want to memorize the Quran. right? So you have to set this goal. Your goal is you want to memorize the Quran. How are you going to do it? We'll talk about it in a second. And then you want to set goals for your community as well, because it's not just about you. You know, Ayman radiallahu anha, Ayman was a special woman. She was the first person to hold the Messenger of Allah ﷺ when he was born. She delivered the Messenger of Allah ﷺ. And she is the only person from the seerah that I'm aware of who lived before his birth and survived after his death. And when Amina, the mother of the Prophet ﷺ, passed away, she told Ayman, who was their servant, then be a mother to my son Muhammad. Be a mother to my son Muhammad. And she was for the rest of her life. And the Prophet ﷺ would even call her Ummi. One time he saw her and he said, Ya Ummi, how are you doing? Oh my mother, how are you doing? And she said, I am okay. Look at her response. I am okay so long as Islam is okay. I am okay so long as Islam is okay. So she understood that I am part and parcel of the community. I am one with the community. If Islam is struggling or suffering somewhere, then I am as well. But if we are okay, then I'm okay. The point being, you have to have goals for yourself and goals for your community, to give back and to be a part of something, right? And you can define that however you want, as the brother recited, وَلِكُلِّ وِجْهَةٌ هُوَ مُوَلِّيهَا فَاسْتَبِقُوا الْخَيْرَاتِ. Everyone will have a direction which they want to go. Whichever way you go, make sure it's something of goodness. Make sure it's something of goodness. Now, when you're setting these goals, you should set SMART goals. All right, how many of you guys have pen and paper? All right, like 3 people in the crowd, mashallah. All you guys have Bukhari memory, everybody else? Right, this is what you do. Write this down. SMART goals. It's an acronym. S-M-A-R-T. SMART. S is for specific. Your goal should be specific. So don't just say, you know, I want to change the world. Define what does that mean to you, right? If you want to memorize the Quran, say, I want to memorize the Quran. Something specific. Don't just say, I want to learn Arabic. I want to finish the Medina books through the online course, and I will do it in X amount of time, right? Something specific, right? And then that way you can identify how you're progressing. Number 2 is M, SMART, M for measurable. It's got to be something concrete so that you can track your progress. So when you say you want to memorize the Quran, a month from now you can track how far have you gotten. Have you finished 1 surah, 2 surahs, 2 pages, 5 pages, 10 pages? What have you done? Right? So something specific and measurable. A for attainable. It's got to be realistic. You want to set a high goal, but it also has to be attainable. It has to be realistic. But set the bar high, because if you don't, you'll shortchange yourself. R for relevant. R for relevant. And this is important more so in the organizational structure. Say you're running your MSA, right? And then someone comes to you and says, look what's happening in Syria. We got to do something about it. Look what's happening in Central African Republic. We got to do something about it. Look what's happening, you know, to where you can name the cause, be it local or abroad. Right? Now you as an MSA, these are all good causes, right? But you as an MSA have to understand, what is our goal as an MSA? What is our goal as YM chapter? What is our goal as a whatever organization you're part of, or you as an individual? And even though these may be good causes, if it doesn't fit in line with what your organization is trying to accomplish, you don't have to do it. One of my problems I have with MSA, and when I do like mentoring and stuff, I'm like, look, a lot of MSAs are almost like chickens without heads. You know, they're just kind of running around, like doing whatever that they think of doing. But stop for a second, pause, and make a plan, focus. And once you do that, you can follow this game plan. So you go from being an organization to being an institution on campus, right? But it has to be relevant to your goals. It has to be relevant to the organization. And the last one, T for time bound. I'm going to memorize the Quran, but I'm going to do it in 1 year. I'm going to memorize the Quran, but I'm going to do it in 1 year. Or like the sister, mashallah, she was a med school student. If you want to read how she did it, go to theidealmuslima.com. She memorized the whole Quran in 2.5 months while being in medical school. And she wrote how she did it on theidealmuslima.com. Time bound, right? You got to set a time limit for your goals. But you want to set high goals for yourself, because Prophet he says, فَإِذَا سَأَلْتُمُ اللَّهَ فَاسْأَلُوهُ الْفِرْدَوْسِ. When you ask Allah for Jannah, ask Him for the highest level of paradise. Don't just settle for just getting right in. Set high goals for yourself. We as a people should be a people of high ambitions and goals. And that will be difficult, right? That will be difficult. You know, the poet, he says, تَرُومُ الْعِزَّ ثُمَّ تَنَامُ لَيْلًا يَغُوصُ الْبَحْرَ مَنْ طَلَبَ اللَّآلِ بِقَدْرِ الْكَدِّ تَكْتَسِبُ الْمَعَالِ وَمَنْ طَلَبَ الْعُلَى سَهَرَ اللَّيَالِ. He says that you claim to want izzah, dignity and honor, but then you sleep at night. He says the one who wants the pearls dives into the deepest parts of the ocean. And then he says, by the level of how much effort you put in, you will get these goals. And then whoever wants a high level, then he stays up at night working. Meaning you have to make sacrifices, right? You have to make sacrifices. And this point, and the time is flying, but this point is perhaps if there's anything, and the reason why I wanted to share this topic with you is because the number one question I get asked wherever I go is, how do you balance being in medical school or being a medical resident or all that stuff, while at the same time, like trying to, learn about Islam and do dawah work and that kind of stuff. And this next point I want to share with you, write it down and write it in gold, don't forget it, right? When you guys are in high school, the point is, first write this first, that let every stage of your life be a stage in which you draw closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Let every stage in your life, wherever you are, because I see parents here, I see college students here, I see high schoolers, I see middle schoolers here. Whatever stage you're in your life, make it a conscientious decision that this stage, I will draw closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what do I mean by that? When you're in high school, when you go from 8th grade to 9th grade, you feel like, man, the world's on top of your shoulders, right? I'm in high school now. Now you're the big boys, right? And then you gotta like manage all your classes and get good grades, and you're trying to do this, and you feel like you have no time for anything else. Until your senior year, and now you're taking like 3 AP classes, right? And you gotta like take your MCATs, your ACE, mashallah, unless you're like super other kid, right? You're taking your ACT and SAT and all that stuff, and you're just always like, I don't got time for any of this, right? Ain't nobody got time for that, right? I gotta focus on what I gotta focus on. Right? Then you get into college, you're like, oh shoot, now it's the real deal. Now life starts. I got 12 credits first semester, and I can't touch MSA. I gotta just get good grades. Only to realize once you become a senior, now you're taking 400 level classes and you got 16 credits. You're like, man, back in the day, back in freshman year, that was awesome. Now life is tough. And when you were a freshman, you're looking at high school and saying, man, life was easy in high school. Freshman year is tough. And then you get into medical school and you're like, man, medical school is tough. My senior year was cake. And then you hit residency, and you're like, man, residency is tough. My medical school was easy. Then you get married and you have kids, and you're like, man, family is tough. I wish I could go back to residency years, right? The point being, you will always feel like you're overwhelmed. You will always feel like you're overwhelmed. But here's what's amazing, is when Allah puts more on your plates, when you advance further, you naturally, you make the decision that I'm gonna cut out what I need to cut out, and I'm gonna focus on what I need to focus on so I can still excel. Right? People say, I want to go overseas and study Islam. I want to go to Bain and do the year-long Arabic program, or go to Qalam and do the year-long seminary program. Well, guess what? Before you can do that, right now, what are you doing with your time? Right now, what are you doing to learn Arabic? Right? This whole dream of taking a year off or taking 4 years off to go to Medina or go to wherever, that's fine and it may work for some people. For a lot of us, it's just a cop-out. It's a cop-out, like, yeah, when I get that chance, I'm going to do it. What are you doing now? What's the point in going to Medina if you don't even know the Arabic language to benefit from the scholars there? You're going to not waste, but you're going to spend 2 more years of your time learning Arabic when you could have done that right now. Right? So use the opportunity that you have now to get that. Right? Make that decision now. Fill up your plate with whatever stage you are in your life to push yourself a little more. Push yourself to higher limits. Right? And that's something that we naturally do as life progresses, but you can do it now in whatever stage you're in right now. So don't forget that. And number 5, prioritize your time. Right? So number 1, always is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when I say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I mean obviously the basics, the 5 pillars of Islam, the 5 daily prayers, fasting in Ramadan, all that stuff. All that's got to be a basic. Some people even like, I'm not going to fast because I have my exam today. All right? Or I got a headache, I'm not going to fast. Or I'm going to do this, I'm not going to do that. Right? The basics have to be there. Number 2 is your family. Your family. Right? Your mom and your dad. Right? Your family. That has to be number 2. Before school, before all work and all that stuff, Allah is number 1, your family is number 2. All right? Never lose track of your mother and your father and what they did for you. Every day, if you leave your home to go somewhere else to university, call them every day. Right? Call them every day. And if you can go back home every weekend, go back home every weekend. Don't ever forget your family, and don't forget the responsibility you have towards your family. Number 3, your priority should be your school. Excel in your school. Do well in your school. That's what we need. We need you to be excellent in everything that you do. And after that, your Islamic activities, right? And after that, your social life and the like. Now, that requires making sacrifice. And they said my time's up. I'm going to take 3 more minutes, all right? Give me 3 more minutes, please, and I finish, inshallah. Saad, forgive me. 3 more minutes. All right, look, you have to make sacrifice. Umar al-Khattab, when he made hijrah from Mecca to Medina, right? The Prophet paired every Meccan with a Medinan. So every Muhajir with the Ansari. Now, Umar al-Khattab and his Ansari partner were they're working in the farms, and so what they decided to do is, look, we want to learn from the Prophet ﷺ, so what we're going to do is this. The Ansari man, one day he's going to go to the Messenger of Allah and spend all day with him ﷺ learning from him, while Umar stays back and has to do the work in the farm. And that night, the Ansari man will teach Umar everything that he learned. And the next day they trade. So the Ansari man is doing the work and Umar al-Khattab is studying from the Messenger of Allah ﷺ. But here's the interesting thing. For them to do that setup, it means one man is doing the work of two. The day that the one is studying, the other one is doing the work of two people. Right? Which means if you want to excel both in your deen and your dunya, you're going to have to make sacrifices. You're going to have to make sacrifices. And if it's your social life or if it's whatever it is, that's what you're going to have to, the decisions you're going to have to make. Right? To cut down on other things so that you can excel in what you want to excel in, those goals that you set for yourself, high goals that you set for yourself. And when I was in medical school, my friends and I, we set some goals for ourselves. Our exams were every Monday morning. Every Monday morning we have our exams. And so the Al-Maghrib classes are on the weekend, right? Friday, Saturday, Sunday. The Bayna classes are on the weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Right? And so we would go to Al-Maghrib classes, we would, 10 to 7 we would be there, then maybe 9, 10 o'clock we eat some dinner, then 10 to like 3 a.m. we would study, and then go back 10 a.m. to class. And then Sunday night we would go straight to the medical school and pull out on later and take our exam Monday morning with a bunch of dua, of course. Right? It was difficult. And we faced challenges, and one time I was sitting with my homeboy, and we were talking, and I was like, look, maybe we need to cut back, man. You see all these other people who don't do this, they're not like going to the masjid every day, and they're not doing this and that, whatever, and they're doing better. I was at the top of my class, I'll tell you that right now, I wasn't, right? But we were just kind of having this discussion. It's about my wife, she put these candies in the house that have, she wrapped around an ayah from the Quran, a translation of an ayah from the Quran. So anybody who comes to the house when they leave, they have to take a candy with an ayah. So their brother took the candy, and as he was leaving, I said, hey, what does the ayah say? So he opened it up and he read it, and subhanAllah, when he read it, I broke down crying. The ayah that he read was the verse in Surah Al-Baqarah where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَوْ أَنَّهُمْ آمَنُوا وَاتَّقَوْا لَمَثُوبَةٌ مِّنْ عِنْدِ اللَّهِ خَيْرٌ لَوْ كَانُوا يَعْلَمُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, if they only believed and kept their duty to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then the reward from Allah would be better for them if they only knew. And I was just like, oh, that was like talking just to us. We were just talking about that. But you keep your iman, you keep your duty to Allah in whatever you're doing, right? The reward of Allah for you will be better even if you go through tests in this world. I went through difficulties in med school for sure. Without question, trying to travel and fundraising and speaking and doing classes and teaching while at the same time maintaining 26 credits, it was hard. I struggled. But you know what? This is a principle you have to understand. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu in tansurullaha yansurkum. If you keep your duty to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and do your best to help the religion of Allah, Allah will help you back, guaranteed. It's a promise from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a condition in the response. You do your part, Allah will help you. You may go through difficulties, but those difficulties are meant to push you back to Allah and draw you closer to Allah in your relation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then when you finish, and when you get to wherever you're going, you'll find out that Allah's plan was always the best for you. I had a lot more to say, but my time is up. Jazakumullahu khairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Wa akhiru alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.